Okay, guys. So the other night we were talking about complicated MMOs, and the topic of EVE Online came up, which is a game that I've never played before, but I've always seen it recommended on different sites, and I always have known that it takes a lot to get into. So someone recommended me this video to watch about it. I think it was James actually. So let's watch this video and let's hear about EVE Online for the first time.
Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and today I'm
Hey,
going to
Scott
talk
Manley.
about EVE Online. Yeah, I want to talk about the Fountain War of 2013, and the reason this is pertinent is because right now there is a Kickstarter which essentially wants to get Jeff Edwards, the writer of military fiction novels and EVE Online player, to write a fictionalized version of the Fountain War of 2013, primarily between the CFC and Test and their various allies. Now, this was a big event, and games have had stories and books written about them, but generally these books are written based upon the
Lore.
backstory. In
Yeah.
fact, EVE Online has had 3 books written about it, covering events in the universe. However, this is the first time, I believe, that somebody is going to try to adapt a set of events that were driven by...
This is such a true statement about MMOs right here. The stories players create through their real lives and the virtual worlds of MMOs are always more meaningful, more real, and more compelling than the designers ever managed to put in for them. I am excited about the Fountain War Kickstarter and cannot wait for more novels like this to highlight the history and deeds of our players as well. Dude, totally, 100%. I mean, what is the most popular thing that anybody in the world knows about World of Warcraft? What's the thing that if someone who's never played World of Warcraft before and has maybe never played an MMO... Hold on, I forgot a light. 1 second. I was like, why is it so dark? What's the thing that if you've never played World of Warcraft before, you know about? It's good old Leroy Jenkins, dude. That's what you know about. And we are so good at making stories ourselves in the MMOs. And that's the thing that I really think that MMOs are the best for, is the player interaction that happens inside of them. And EVE Online is just the pinnacle,
player
dude.
actions, and that really sets it apart and makes it worth reading about. So what was the Fountain War? The Fountain War was a large invasion of a region of the EVE Online galaxy called Fountain. Now, it's home to an NPC corporation, but more importantly, it is rich in resources, which was what the alliances were all after. At the time of the invasion, it was held by an alliance called Test Alliance.
So for anyone who doesn't know about EVE Online is a sci-fi MMORPG in which... Now I'm going to get a lot of this wrong because I've never played this game before and I've only heard things from other people about it over the years. So let's try to get as much of it right as I possibly can, right? So EVE Online is a game in which you gather resources over long periods of time and you create trade routes across galaxies in order to get those resources from place to place. Now, it takes extremely long amounts of time to do all of this. In order to build battleships, in order to get into the cockpit of battleships, in order to be able to successfully pilot them, it can take 6 months plus in order to put something together. A lot of this is spent on real world time. A lot of this is spent with real world money, and it's very, very difficult to get there. There have been wars and battles in which $20,000+ of resources have been lost, but more than that, a lot of time has been lost. The entire economy in this game is player generated, from what I understand. That means that all the items that go into the economy are created by players. And if that item gets lost in a battle, that item is gone. Boop. Out of existence. It's gone forever. And the only way to get it back is to have someone make it again. And so there can be really, really rare items in this world that just disappear forever and no one ever sees them again. So a war is a big deal.
Generally referred to as Test. And the invaders were the CFC, the Cluster F Coalition, which has since rebranded itself as Imperium, because that's better for a book, no doubt. On top of these 2 large alliances, the Test also found assistance in the form of the N3 Coalition and the Pandemic Legion. The CFC is made up of a number of alliances: Space Monkey Alliance, Tactical Narcotics Team, Fatal Ascension, but at the center of it all is Goonswarm Federation. Goonswarm Federation is built around...
I already see that I'm going to need a history lesson on how EVE Online works. I'm going to need an introductory course in order to be able to fully appreciate what's happening here.
Members of the Something Awful forums. They have a reputation for trolling the...
What you go to college for, Rubus? Oh, I studied EVE Online in college, actually. Yeah, I got a 4-year degree in EVE Online.
They're fond of saying, we're not here to ruin the game, we're here to ruin your game. But despite not taking the game too seriously, they have in fact turned themselves into the most powerful corporation in EVE Online. And after a couple of major wars against their enemies, they managed to disband their mortal enemy, Bob, by essentially recruiting one of the directors and getting them to disband the corporation. Having vanquished their foes, they settled down, took some space, and for a while became the biggest alliance in the game. In the months leading up to the war, Technetium had become the greatest money generator in EVE Online, and led by Goonswarm, a number of alliances had banded together to create OTEC, the Organization of Technetium Exporting Corporations. Now, Test Alliance Please Ignore, they originally came from Reddit, and after a few early skirmishes with Goonswarm, Goonswarm actually saw kindred spirits in this alliance that had formed from an off-site forum or whatever. And they kind of brought them under their wing. They helped them carve out regions of nullsec, and they flew fleets together, and they had a great history. But eventually, Test grew up. In fact, they grew to be much larger than Goonswarm. And as they established themselves, they no longer wanted to be known as Goonswarm's pet. Relationships soured, and so Best Bros went their separate ways. Jesus. They began to make deals.
I don't think you guys understand, because it's hard to get across. So this game people take really, really seriously. There is so much time that you put into it, and it can all be gone in the blink of an eye, that it's hard not to take it really seriously. It feels very real in EVE Online, from what I've heard from other people. There is a sort of sense that you are the people controlling everything that's going on in this world, and the story of the MMO is secondary to all of that. So when you're burning these bridges, when you're ruining relationships, you have to know that there are other people out there who do not want your best interests in their hearts anymore, and that's dangerous for you. It's not simple like in World of Warcraft, where people are, maybe bringing a mob to get you killed while you're out there grinding, or trying to like crash your raid or whatever and throw it all for you. That's not what we're dealing with here. We are dealing with multi-level sabotage, spies, Cold War type situations that can go hot very quickly. And when they go hot, you will lose real life resources that you have poured into this game permanently, disappearing into the vacuum of space in shards and fractured elements of your spacecraft, debris scattered to the vacuum because you pissed off the wrong person forever ago. Those are the kinds of stakes that you're dealing with in EVE Online. It is not roleplay. It is real in that way. You are not pretending that this stuff can happen. It actually happens. The relationships that you hold with people in this game are not just your buddies in the guild. They are your competitors, your alliances for now. But it is different than anything else that you can possibly imagine in that way. EVE Online is a landmark example of what a true community-driven MMO can be, and one that I have never been able to get into because it just seems so headache-inducingly insane. I talk about Guild Wars 2 being confusing. I do not need this in my life. Why am I being drawn to it? I don't know, but I'm really excited to learn.
With factions that were traditionally hostile to Goonswarm, and eventually formed the Honey Badger Coalition with the Northern Coalition and Pandemic Legion. But personally, I clung to the hope that Test and Goonswarm would get back together to continue raising hell together across the galaxy. But all those hopes died during the Battle of Asakai. It was the largest battle to date in the game's history, and Test sent a large fleet against Goonswarm in the hopes of killing the Big Red Boat's Titan, which had made a navigational error, let's say, triggering the entire battle. But the Honey Badger Coalition didn't continue for long. As I said, there was drama early on in 2013, and Test eventually left the Honey Badger Coalition and struck out on its own. And in the months leading up to the Fountain War, Test had actually got embroiled in a conflict with its former partners. Now it was N3, which was made up of the Northern Coalition, Nulli Secunda, and Nexus Fleet. And of course, they were also fighting, skirmishing, let's say, with Pandemic Legion. It was a low-level conflict, to be sure. It was more driven by pilots being bored, skirmishing on the borders, rather than trying to grab and acquire strategic resources of any value. But the event that really triggered the war was the release of Odyssey. Now, Odyssey was an EVE Online expansion, and one of its core design changes was changing the way materials were used, changing the way they were found and distributed throughout the galaxy.
Okay.
And this was responsible for destroying the value of technetium that Goonswarm had been so reliant on for the last few years.
Crashed out the economy.
Now, a couple of days after this, the leader of Goonswarm, the Mittani, held a State of the Goonian address, and he essentially said, and I quote, "Odyssey has come and left us destitute. Who is right and who is wrong doesn't really matter. If we do not invade Fountain, someone else will. And they will enjoy the kind of wealth that we once had while we wallow in wrenching poverty." Yes.
Bro, the places that these people get pushed to by these game updates are absolutely insane. This guy, they take it so seriously, and I don't even begrudge them for taking it so seriously. I totally get how you get to that point. It is, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm reading through the annals of history at this point.
The Mittani has a way with words. Beyond these inspiring words, he also laid out some battle plans and warned everyone that it was no longer going to be an easy victory. Goonswarm was not the largest alliance in the game anymore, and they were invading the territory hosted by the largest alliance. And of course, within a couple of hours, an official announcement was made from Test to say, "Get your stuff out of Fountain," and yeah, it's on. Now, within 3 days, there would be a major victory for the CFC. And it didn't come through fighting, it didn't come through careful tactics, it came through a desire for vengeance on the part of Sort Dragon, who had been the leader of the Honey Badger Coalition, which had fragmented. But he still maintained control of 5 important systems in Fountain. Apparently they were used for building super capsules for Pandemic Legion, which was why they wanted to maintain control of them. Well, on June 9th, Test essentially lost control of these systems. Sort Dragon essentially dropped sovereignty, having told the Mittani and Goonswarm to be ready.
Bro, what is this game? Can somebody please, who plays EVE Online, comment down below and explain to me how you get into EVE Online? How do you come about going, okay, you know what? I'm tired of the spreadsheets at work. I'm going to go do the spreadsheets in EVE Online. That's going to be my new place to escape to. What is up with it? What is going on over there? Why are people so enthralled by it? And how do you get to this place?
For this. And GSOL, Goonswarm Offensive Logistics, sprung into action, and within a few hours, 4 of the 5 systems had been secured. While they were isolated systems, they were important.
Dude, stop! I was expecting to see gameplay footage, you know? It's hard for me to even watch this video because I'm trying to compare this to something in my brain, but when I'm only seeing pictures that look like this, what does all of this mean, dude? Who makes these things? How do you... What happened to you people?
Important bridgeheads, especially
in World of Warcraft. Wasn't enough, dude. So we have to go deeper. We have to become the Matrix.
You consider the logistics of jumping capsule ships in and out and throughout the region.
Okay.
But the first major battle of the Fountain War would be the battle for J5A-I.
I'm downloading EVE Online now.
This is a system which connects to a neighboring region, the Cloud Ring, which is owned by the CFC. They were using the system on the other side, B-D, as their staging system for all their offensive operations. So this was their first attempt to push across the bridge into Fountain directly. Capturing and holding J5A was incredibly important. It was a choke point. Without it being secured...
Okay, let's zoom this back out for a second. J5A. This is trade routes? Perhaps? He says completely unconfidently.
On the other side, B-D, as their staging system for all their offensive operations. So this was their first attempt to push across the bridge.
Can you guys understand
into Fountain directly. Capturing and holding J5A was incredibly important. It was a choke point. Without it being secured by the CFC, no invasion could occur. But this was where the CFC's battle plan ground to a halt. Test, made up with the Pandemic Legion and N3, while they had had their disagreements, the one thing they did agree on was that they all liked shooting at goons. The combined might of these alliances pushed the CFC back into B-D, and indeed they pursued them. But the CFC had been developing B-D as a staging system, and Test and their friends found they were taking heavy losses as they attempted to attack the station there. They ultimately withdrew back to J5A and declared a victory. But within the week, J5A would be captured by the CFC. However, for the next few weeks after that, the CFC would be unable to progress. In part, the CFC were hampered by a poor choice of fleet designs early on. They relied on Tengu fleet built around tech.
How do you realize that you're in the middle of a war? At what point do you know that this is a war breaking out?
Or tech fleet, which was built around Tempest fleet issues.
I feel like I'm seeing things I shouldn't be.
Both of these ships were expensive, but more importantly, they were of limited supply, and the markets of New Eden were unable to keep up with the demand. This is what I was saying. In particular, Test had been exploiting sentry drones a great deal, which at this time were very, very powerful. They would field fleets of Dominixes and slave all their drones to the fleet commander, who could essentially call down coordinated strikes on any target. On top of this, their allies in the form of N3 and Pandemic
it's like new weapon technology.
Legion were able to field very powerful super capital fleets. But beyond these tactical differences, an important time zone difference emerged. The CFC was very, very powerful during US time zones, but during Australian time zones they were very weak, so systems would be captured only to be lost hours later. Taking advantage of this, Test and their allies were able to recapture 4 of the systems that had been gifted to the CFC by Sort Dragon. Of course, the CFC's response was, well, I didn't want that system anyway, but that's what everyone says when you lose a system in EVE Online. Now, during this stalemate, I did actually get some time to fight in the Fountain War, although it was in a very limited capacity as part of a siege fleet. A siege fleet was essentially a swarm of stealth bombers, which would fly to a strategic structure and either destroy it outright or reinforce it. Bombers are very fast and mobile and can be jumped around by Black Ops battleships. This mobility and this large amount of firepower makes them excellent for harassing enemy targets and keeping their logistics.
This game looks crazy, dude. It sort of reminds me of Faster Than Light, but way more complicated. I've got to download EVE Online. I have to see what the inside of this game looks like. I have to feel it. I have to turn off all the lights, and I have to sit way back in my chair like this, and I have to say things like, reaching warp speed.
Logistics teams running around and keeping stations repaired and things like that. But it wasn't any way to really win the war. Just a way to keep the enemy busy while the real problems are dealt with elsewhere.
Distractionary tactics.
Other alliances saw this as an opportunity. In particular, Black Legion decided to start harassing CFC moons, eventually causing the CFC a great deal of trouble, to the point that apparently the CFC just decided to bribe Black Legion to join in on the attack on Fountain. The CFC had very, very deep pockets. Now, on the other side, Test, they hadn't been so good at managing their money, allegedly, and their ability to fund a long, protracted war against the CFC was very much open to question. To take advantage of this, of course, the CFC made a point of going after Test's main money-making moons to try and cut down the amount of income on their side. As June ended, July would start with a major blow to Test and its alliances. On July 1st, N3 lost control over 200 of its star systems in the southeast of New Eden. Some player had risen to a position of great power within S2N citizens, and approached the CFC with an offer to disband the corporations, essentially forfeiting the territory it controlled. While a loss of this scale has been a death blow to other alliances, N3 survived. thanks in large part to heroic efforts by their fleets and by pandemic
So it's imperialism. The whole game is imperialism. Yes, am I reading that correctly? That it's about sort of allying yourself with these large corporations that own entire star systems of different resources and then working for them. Now, how in the world do you become, as an individual, somebody who is actually useful in this game? Do you have to try to find a crew to become a part of and sort of work your way up from there and learn the ropes through working for other people? How do you even get in contact with the people who you work for? I can't... This is what I'm saying is like... In other MMOs, you go, yes, I've played an MMO before. I understand how leveling works. I get how you get into the game. I understand that you start at the bottom and work your way up. But in a game like this, I don't even see an overworld that you're walking around on at any point. Is it boards that you message on? How do you... I have to play it. I have to play it. I hate that I have to play it. I feel like this video is going to get no views. I feel like there's no way anyone cares about this game anymore. Do they care? Is this game huge? Okay, hold on. Let's see. Hold on. Let's see. I was looking at somebody. Don't worry about that, guys. Daily players EVE Online. I cannot get wrapped up in this. There's 98,000 daily active players. There's a community here. 24,000 to 32,000 concurrent players. That's kind of surprising, honestly. Monthly players EVE Online. They give player data? I don't know what any of these things mean. Most played characters. What is all of this? What is all of this, bro? I just want to know how many people logged in this month. Even on population chart daily, it's all the way up to like 50K, almost 60K sometimes. Yearly population chart. Dude. Okay, it's much lower now. 50K, something like that population. So there's like dramatically less people. There's 10 million subscribers, though. Okay, we might have to play EVE Online a little bit.
Region, which deployed their entire capital and super capital fleets and recaptured the lost territory in a matter of days. But back in Fountain, Test would have been left alone. Taking advantage of those few days of weakness, CFC started to win fights again, deploying newly redesigned fleets built around Megathrons. While no new territory was gained, this was an important morale booster on the CFC side. A few days later, on July 5th and 4th, one of the most interesting and most controversial events of the war was about to happen.
Okay.
In the system of Z9PPH, the Test capital fleet had been pinned down by a CFC special ops group. With all those expensive Test toys trapped, thousands of CFC members flooded into the system in their shiny new Megathrons and started pulverizing the targets. For 7 hours, Test ships were getting taken down, and it seemed like the entire fleet was doomed.
Bro, just imagine being one of those people where your ship is just blowing up underneath of you, and you think about all that time and all of that money that you spent on it, dude. Your whole time working up to this point where you felt like you were someone that could be something important, only to have it pulled out from underneath of you, only to realize that you are not the main character in all of this, and you are but a pawn that is being used by these giant corporations for which you're employed because you've thrown your hat behind them thinking it would make you the victor, only to have it come crashing down around you.
And given Test's weak finances, perhaps their entire war effort could go down in this one system. And then, for Test, a miracle happened. With over 2,000 players in the system and the node creaking under the weight of all the calculations, everyone got disconnected. The ships just vanished instantly, and essentially the largest battle since Asakai ceased to exist. Now, of course, CFC had the upper hand and they logged back in as quickly as possible, but Test leadership told their ships to stay offline. And so Test was able to save a large part of their fleet. And it was all down to a bit of poorly thought out system administration by CCP. Essentially, there were multiple systems on a single processor, and their plan was to take all the systems that weren't involved in this giant fight and move them to other processors. However, due to an error in communication, Z9 PP-H was also moved and everyone disconnected, thus spoiling one of the big battles of the Fountain War. There were certainly accusations leveled against CCP that this was perhaps an inside job to save the test, but ultimately the Mittani said he harbored no ill will.
Bro, the devs are in on it too, man. Bro, what is this game? This is a modern software engineering marvel that this was possible to happen. Like, that's so crazy. Dude, they had people on the inside of the game, dude.
Well, and the CFC's invasion continued.
Fucking
the day
anime,
after this
dude.
server-induced failure, the CFC suffered another setback as they tried to establish an outpost in J5A. After deploying the outpost egg, the CFC was unable to defend it until downtime due to the dominance of N3 during the Australian time zone.
Everything's lost.
Regardless, within a couple of days, the CFC had secured Z9 and its neighbouring systems, and from this point, they had...
Has anyone tried being peaceful? Have we considered that in this game? Have we considered that maybe you cannot kill other people for resources? I know that this is talking crazy.
Unassailable bridgehead. From this point, there would be no turning back. July 15th saw the trapping and assassination of a Titan-level spy within Fatal Ascension. Through network addresses, the pilot Ya was linked to Manfred Sidious of Pandemic Legion.
Okay.
All Titan pilots were asked to log in for an important operation, and partway through this, the Titan pilots all turned on the suspected spy. But within test, the strain was really starting to show. The CEO, Buddha, in a State of the Alliance, essentially recapped the war and began to ask for donations to support the ongoing war effort. He pleaded with his pilots to log in and fight. And this is really important in EVE Online. You see, EVE Online is a game. Winning a battle in an online game is something that's easy. Winning a war requires you to stop the other side logging in and fighting. You have to make it not fun for them. This is something that Goonswarm actually excels at. They excel at trolling their enemies. But Test knew all these tricks. They'd fought alongside the CFC, and they were probably just as immune to trolling as the CFC. They were able, with their allies, to consistently stall any further progress by the CFC. But July 19th saw the CFC's plan of attack finally come to fruition. They had held control over J5A and 4EP for more than 35 days. This meant that they were able to deploy jump bridges. This enabled them to rapidly move spacecraft around Fountain and project the force where it was needed. They became a mobile force and redeployed to 4EP, one of the original systems donated to them by Sort Dragon. And with that, the stalemate was over. But on top of this, more bad news happened. N3 was once again drawn away because of activity by another alliance called Solar Fleet. Pandemic Legion at this point saw the writing on the wall and essentially left, but not before they took with them some of the best pilots from Test. In particular, Beffa.
They said, let's move on to bigger and better things. Let's live to fight another day and let's see what the future holds.
Military leader decided that Pandemic Legion was the way to go. A logistics director made off with over 130 billion ISK worth of assets, while others simply stopped logging in to play the game. The replacement military director didn't really have a plan to save Fountain at this point. At best, they came up with the idea of a symbolic, glorious last stand at 6 VDT-H.
Bro, this is the moment where you as a player goes, you know what? I think I'm going to go do something else, man. I think I'm going to leave and go join the other side or just go explore a different part of this solar system, this galaxy. I think that I'm done here, dude.
This rather
Last Stand? What are you talking about, Last Stand, dude? I've been here for like 100 hours.
System actually had very little strategic value, but it had a sentimental value to Test. It was the place they had staged out of when they had first invaded Fountain and taken it. It was what Test would call home. This would be the final battle between the two biggest coalitions in EVE history.
Have you guys ever heard of the Animorphs? I feel like I'm learning the history of the Animorphs here. If you've never read the Animorphs, then you can't understand what I'm talking about, but it is confusing and complicated. Cue the Neil Cicierega clip of the Animorphs discussion.
And these big battles for systems typically take several days, because what will happen is you will do a certain amount of damage to a structure and then it will be reinforced for hours and hours and hours. The idea being that you can't just come in with your force and kill the enemy while they're not asleep. They have to get a chance to organize a defense, so you have reinforcement timers. Reinforcement timers essentially provide a schedule for battles to take place between giant fleets. So with hours and hours of warnings, the CFC had control of the system, but they did not have sovereignty in the system. They went in and they made serious preparations for the last final battle. On every moon in the system, they placed starbases with their giant shields and guns. They would be able to hide at a moon, but they would offer no safe harbor.
Look at all of these people, dude. This is so crazy.
For Test or any of its allies. Thousands of CFC ships moved into the system and either loitered or they logged off in the hours leading up to the fight. And in the final minutes leading up to the reinforcement timer expiring, thousands of players logged on. The number of pilots in the system quickly spiked to just over 4,000 as the two sides began the final battle for Fountain. With that many spacecraft in system, time dilation kicked in heavily, slowing things down to 1/10 of normal speed.
Okay, so in EVE Online, when there's too many people doing or participating in a battle, what happens is a thing called time dilation, where they slow down time so that the servers have time to process everything that happens in real time so that you can actually have a fair outcome of the situation. Players often refer to this as fighting through Jello, I believe.
And CCP had been aware this battle was coming. They had moved the system onto the most powerful computer they had.
Headaches!
In terms of number of players involved, it was the largest battle in EVE Online history. But there was never any doubt as to the outcome. By this point, Test was so weak and so disorganized it could not hold the system. The Test fleet fought on the field for a while and found themselves victims of deadly bombing runs by the CFC. The CFC actually managed to kill many of its own ships with their own bombing runs. Eventually they warped in a capital fleet right on top, and the Test fleet decided to scatter and look for a safe place to regroup, but there was none to be had. The gates were blocked, the moons were all dangerous, and so they warped back onto the fleet en masse in the hope of perhaps taking something with them. Reputedly, only one dreadnought.
You look at your co-pilot and you're just like, it's a good day to die.
Died in this glorious last stand, and the system finally fell into CFC's hands. And having made its glorious last stand, Test finally agreed that Fountain had been lost. They pulled back to Delve, and with no one contesting Fountain, the Fountain War was over. But fighting with Test and the CFC continued for some time, because that's what people like to do in EVE Online. And so that brings us to this Kickstarter once again. I think there is an absolutely solid story here.
Maybe if there's more characterization. There's so much explanation that I need under the surface. This is what I'm saying. I'm now going to have to go and watch a video that's like, this is how this stuff works, you know? This is how EVE Online started. This is how it plays out. This is what these things mean. This is what these star systems are. This is where they're located. This is how you get around in this game. I need to know so much more about this, dude. God, I don't want to start covering EVE Online, but I feel like I have no choice now.
Giant space battles for huge sections of space. There's egos, there's inspiring speeches, spies, terrible mistakes, and brilliant strategic decisions, all on a scale involving thousands of real players that actually happened, albeit in a fictional universe. And that's why I'm telling this story, because, you know, from the outside, it's very hard to understand necessarily what's going on in EVE, but trying to tell it like a narrative, I think the whole thing comes alive, and I really want to see this turned into a book, because I think it will be a really good read. Now, let's be clear. While this is a project run by the Mittani, it is not Goon Swarm propaganda. All the sides of this war have come together and endorsed this production. It is a story which captures...
Bro, are these factions still around? Please, EVE Online players, if you see this video, if you hear me out there, wherever you may be, Star Children, please tell me how the heck this all works. Like, how did you get into this game? How long have you been playing for? How do you become something that is a part of one of these large-scale battles? What is all of this? Where do I sign up?
Everything great about EVE Online. The giant scale, the thousands of players involved. There is no other game like EVE Online, and it is hard for anyone that hasn't participated in these kind of conflicts to appreciate it.
No, 100%.
I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.
Well, thank you, Scott Manley. If you guys aren't already subscribed to Scott Manley, give him a subscription. He's obviously got a whole bunch of people on him, and this video has been seen tons and tons of times. Give the video a like if you haven't already. But, like, this is nuts, dude. What is going on over there in EVE Online? Like, what kind of MMO is this? Okay, I'm gonna have to go look up more stuff about this. That's the video, guys. I can't sit here and theorize anymore about it. I appreciate you all watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Stay safe out there. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.